You don't wanna never count yourself out, make it a great one. Just be sure to leave out the doubt. Time to wake
All right,
up.
so today we're talking about how to delegate, like your business depends on it. And so, Jason, tell us a little bit about the topic, what we're going to be talking about.
Well, I think delegation sounds simple enough. It sounds like it doesn't require a conversation, except it does, because it is an art and a science at the same time. It is a skill that we must continue to develop if we want to be successful and grow a healthy team and a healthy organization.
Yeah, and I think it, maybe go into a little bit of like, what is delegation, right? We could maybe focus on that a little bit first, because when someone hears that, they might be thinking about different parts of delegation. So let's break it down a little bit. So delegation, what's the kinds that might exist? And I don't think this is fully comprehensive, but at least it breaks it down for us as we talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to have an idea of ways to use delegation and ways you shouldn't use delegation, because here's the key thing, right? If you want a quick kind of key moment to remember, when you misuse delegation, you misuse people.
Yeah.
When you misuse delegation, you use people. And that's not what we're about. You don't use people, you empower people.
Yeah.
So the way to do that is the proper use of delegation. So let's talk about knowing some proper ways and what delegation is and what it looks like.
All right, so wrote these down. Let's think about the different types of delegation that exist. So one is a delegating according to the role, right? So you have role responsibilities within that role. So according to the role, you delegate based on that, right? Then we have a little bit deeper in that, which is the authority or responsibility based delegation.
Yeah.
So from the role, what comes from that, and delegating based upon that, right?
Sure.
But then we have like task delegation, and then temporary and skill based. So maybe we could touch a little bit on each one of those just to kind of set the stage, if you will. So delegating according to the role. So it's tied to the role. It could also be tied to things like strategy or like committees that get dispersed from that strategy. And it could be based upon the team dynamics, right? The needs of the team, how they're wired, and what's the need from that, right? And then there's the authority and the responsibility type delegating. So maybe touch on that just a second on what that might look like.
Well, the nice thing about, or I think a healthy thing about looking at delegating according to authority or influence or responsibility is you're looking beyond a role. You can look beyond a role.
Yeah.
You're bringing in cross experience. Maybe they've had experience somewhere else or within a different department. They just bring a wider scope oftentimes than their role.
Right. Yeah.
And so you're looking at who the person is, not just the role they're in.
Yeah.
And if they do have that kind of expertise or that influence, you can delegate to them knowing that they have what it takes.
Yeah. Well, and I think of the miscellaneous part of a job description.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, there's some things there that we know you're going to bring extra to the table probably. Yeah. And we got to just figure that out within the delegation.
Now, you could do it within a team.
Yeah.
Within that team or within that role, this person is delegating somebody within their team to carry some significant weight. Yeah,
for sure. And then task delegation. How's this different from responsibility, or how's this different from delegating according to the role? I'm thinking about the task itself.
It might be too soon, but what we're not saying is don't dump and run. Don't. One of the misuses of delegation is here's everything I don't want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Or here's the things that I think are beneath me or below me or I don't have time for it. And that comes out. So we're not saying that when you're talking about task delegation. Task delegation, when we're talking about it, there are important things that need to happen, and it's not a long term, right? It's just I trust you to go make this particular thing happen so the greater team can accomplish what's been set in front of them.
Yeah.
So it's not a lesser than.
Yeah.
Right. What it actually is communicating is I trust you.
Yeah.
In this moment.
I think language is an indicator here. So one of the things to pay attention to, especially, if you're leading a team, if you're leading a company, pay attention to this, is what's the language that you're actually saying?
Yeah.
I was just in a lunch meeting last week and was meeting with a leader of an entire corporation, and he was saying my direct reports, and then he was saying on our lower level our lower level employees. And I was just like, and it was just like, we have a great relationship. And I was like, hey, buddy, we gotta switch the language here. Like, if you're saying this in front of certain people in your organization, how does that make them feel? Right. So language is the indicator in the task side too, not only the roles, but then the task. Right. Because we can empower people to do certain tasks that may not be in their role, like the miscellaneous we talked about. But how you do it and the language you're using is going to affect it big time.
When you think of the language, the way you labeled this category, task delegation, it is a task, so it's not long-term.
Yeah.
Right. It's not forever. It's not a concrete position or role that you're asking someone to serve in.
Yeah.
But it also says back, are you a trustworthy person? It is a way you can begin to kind of test out someone's leadership, their responsibility, their commitment, their follow through.
Yeah. Test into those waters a little bit, see what it's like. Yeah. And then the temporary, obviously being short term, obviously could go into the task, but it's labeled differently in the sense that there are just things that are just short term. Right. And here's an example. You have someone in an organization who's really good with social media, but you don't have a marketing team yet. Right. Okay. We're going to use their skills and we really want to get this out to social media. We really want to, share this with our community. Would you be willing to take this project on? Short term, may take a month, might take a few weeks, whatever, but it's short term. That's kind of one of those areas that fit in there. But then the other one was skill based. And we've kind of hit on this a little bit, which is what are the skills you're bringing to the table and how do we utilize it per our company, but also per our team?
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love to do is as we're forming new teams, maybe it's over a project, it's over an initiative, it's to look in the room and say, acknowledge one another's strengths, acknowledge like the things that we're each bringing to the table, and then just to ask the question, do we have everything we need to be successful?
Yeah.
Or do you see some vulnerability or exposure that if we had this, it would ensure success?
Love that question.
And then it brings in that person. So who do we know that has that skill? Who do we know that has that strength?
Yeah.
It's a win-win.
Yeah. I think sometimes too, we think, oh yeah, of course it'll be successful. You have to ask like some little sub questions on that. Like, oh, do you remember the time we last talked about this and we went ahead with it because we said we thought we'd be successful, right? It's like diving into it a little bit. All right. So why don't we delegate then? Because I'm thinking, okay, we can learn all the different ways to delegate, but what's holding us back from actually delegating? And we don't need to go into too much of it, but I think this is going to resonate as you hear some of this. You're going to resonate with this, as do I. So what are some of those reasons that we don't delegate?
Well, can I add one?
Yeah.
Because the first thing that popped in my mind is why do I think, well, let me just be vulnerable, be transparent. Earlier on in my leadership, why did I not delegate? Insecurity.
Yeah.
Insecurity.
Sure.
For a lot of reasons. One, it's my name on it. So it goes to what you said, lack of trust. But insecurity, what if they do better?
Yep.
What if they do better than me?
Yeah.
What does that mean for me if they, right? And so there was just some insecurity within me that prevented me from empowering others. We talk about lack of trust, desire for control, and that could also feed into insecurity. Right?
Yeah.
We want to lead the control. Perfectionism.
I got like all these people.
I'm looking at you on that one to say,
people are just like flying through my head right now. Like hit this, and I'm sometimes this in some ways. And so it's not always like, hey, is this you all the time? It's just like, do you see yourself in this category sometimes, right? Perfectionism. That's a good one. Yeah.
My way's the right way. It's just hard to get beyond that mindset. So, This one's tricky because we say time constraints. We don't have time.
Yeah.
But that's actually a bigger lie, isn't it?
You know what? Let's just pause right here. We're just going to go into another podcast or another video, and we're just going to talk about this. This one right here, time constraints, I think we often use it as an excuse. It's the first thing we go to. But it might be a reason why we don't delegate is because we say there's a time constraint. And it's just quicker if I do it myself, right? If I do it, I already know it. And Rory Vaden comes to mind. So he wrote the book Multiply on Purpose, right? Procrastinate on Purpose. That's what it is. But so he uses this as like a 30 time rule. So anything that you are going to train someone on, you should spend 30 times the amount that task takes. And that's a lot. So 5 minutes, you're going to spend 150 minutes on that. That's a lot. And so in our minds, we can think, we just got to get this done. And if I take the time to try to actually delegate this well, I'm going to have to train with it. That word training gets attached to delegating a lot of times.
Yeah. Which, don't go down the rabbit hole, but the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Right.
In fact, the more seamless collaboration gets or delegation gets, the more leadership feels effortless.
Yeah. Practice it.
One of your favorite, we were talking about him earlier, kind of before we began, was Mark Twain. And I don't know if this is a Mark Twainism. It sounds like something Mark Twain would say. Something to the effect of, if I had more time, I would have done it slower.
Okay.
I would have done it slower if I had more time, kind of a statement, meaning we tell ourselves we don't have time, but actually, because you rushed it, you end up consuming more time because you're correcting flaws along the way.
Yeah,
anyway,
I thought you were going to use the more I get to know people, the more I like my dog. I thought, well, that's a time constraint because you're just like, you know what, forget people. I'm just going to do it myself.
Oh, man.
All right, so then we have lack of skills. So why don't we delegate? There's lack of trust, the desire for control. We have the perfectionism, time constraints, but then there's lack of skills. Sometimes we just haven't sharpened those skills. And you kind of played in the one that you just said.
Yep.
And then there's comfort zone. Like sometimes we have a discomfort in actually doing this well. We feel vulnerable in it. Like you talked about the control piece, like, okay, like I don't want to be the person who's not the smartest in the room, or I don't want people to feel like, that I'm not that person.
Yeah.
So the comfort zone sometimes can be like, it can be a vulnerable thing.
Right.
Like if I teach this to you and you just, go and just take it and run with it and you're awesome at it, it's like, why did it take me 2 years to conquer that when it took them 2 days?
Yeah, there's some real natural barriers we've got to get over, some mental barriers. A leadership barrier in this conversation would be, talking about comfort zone.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to ask for help.
Right.
I struggle asking for help. So I see delegation as asking for help.
Yeah.
But it's so much more than that and bigger than that. And really, what are we doing? We're making it about us. We're making it about me. And anytime we constrain the organization to me and my strengths and my personality, we limit it.
Yeah.
But we do. We struggle asking for help. So that could be a comfort zone issue where we're trying to get beyond that comfort zone to empower others.
And let me add to that. If you haven't done it and here's the fact. You've got to get out of your comfort zone. Listening to this, listen to that again. You have to get out of your comfort zone in order to delegate well, right? So here's the thing that comes after that. If you haven't seen the results, sometimes you don't want to do it. But if you haven't got out of your comfort zone, you'll never see the results.
It's why I like your next one, because I think it's probably the biggest, honestly. Haven't seen it or haven't felt the benefits.
Yeah.
We've either seen it done wrong,
right,
or we haven't seen it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go from here. Why delegate then?
Yeah, right.
And let's just spend a couple minutes on this. But what's the reason why we delegate? First off, we're going to have in the resource in the show notes, we'll have some of the studies on this. But there's a Gallup study that says that basically you are 33%, and I don't want to get this wrong, CEOs who excel in delegating will generate 33% higher revenue. That's a Gallup study. So why delegate? Because this is how your company is going to grow.
Right.
I mean, in simple terms.
When misused, you use people and your business is going to suffer.
Yeah.
When done appropriately, leaders are going to rise up and your business is going to soar. You're going to see revenue growth. You're going to see culture growth. You're going to see health just skyrocket in your company, because what you're doing is you're inviting people to the table.
Yeah.
You're giving people some ownership.
Yeah.
And the ability to speak in, and you get to multiply yourself. How many times has a leader said, I wish I could multiply myself.
Right. Yeah.
There's so much in front of me. I've got so much I want to do. If I could you can.
Yeah.
It's called delegation.
Oh, I like that. All right. So, and here's a statement. Delegating is one of the quickest ways to expedite experience. So as a leader, you have to ask yourself, am I expediting experience or am I stifling it?
That's good.
Am I holding it back or am I expediting their experience?
Yeah.
How many times in organizations have we seen people there for 5-10 years and they're not where we want them to be? Extreme ownership, bringing Jocko into this, right? You got to ask yourself, is it because of me, right? So just to explain a little bit of a matrix that we call this the expediting experience matrix, right? So essentially you have your burden level, which is their responsibilities. It's the stuff that you delegate by role or by task or by all those things that we just talked about. But on the perpendicular axis, we have guiding and mentoring. And so if you're giving them a good amount of burden and you're giving them the responsibility and you're delegating well and you're guiding and mentoring them, you're expediting their experience.
Right.
But if you're giving them low experience or you're giving them low responsibility and low delegation and you're not guiding and mentoring them, you're stifling their experience. Those are the two extremes. Right? Now, I think there's other scenarios that you could explain, which is like, okay, let's say you do give them great responsibilities, you're delegating well to them, but you're not guiding and mentoring them. We're creating robots.
Right.
They're competent, but they're robots.
Yeah.
And on the other side, which I think is very interesting, but if you don't give them a lot of responsibility, you don't give them applicable responsibility, I should say, and you don't delegate well, but you're guiding and mentoring all the time, telling the stories, you're going through it with them.
Yeah.
You're actually creating incompetence.
Right. There's just a real practical process, I was sharing with you that I've implemented with my teams when you're talking about this axis that you're working off of.
Yeah.
And you don't delegate to everyone the same way.
Right.
They're not coming into it at the same level of authority or responsibility or skill set and on and on.
Yep.
And so being able to know who and how you're going to delegate, it could be, when we were talking about when I delegate, I could delegate, hey, I want you to inform me along the way.
Okay.
So keep me a part of the process.
Right.
I'm going to delegate it to you, but you're going to inform me along the way. Another form of delegation is you're going to bring it to the proposal. I want you to get everything you need and put a plan on a page, and then I will do the approval.
Yeah, you approve it. Yep.
And then there's this other delegation that says, I trust you. You have this past proven record, this experience. I know we're in sync. We're on the same page. Move forward, like act.
Yeah.
Just carry it out. I trust you. So people delegating at different levels, and you can even delegate differently with one person, differently on different projects. Same person, but different skill sets for different projects. It's okay to vary how you delegate.
And here's the two areas to think about, which is what's the risk involved and what's the urgency with those tasks, right? So going along with what you just said, depending on their skill set, depending on where they are, depending on what's needed. We got to think of it in two different kind of moving lines here, which is what's the risk of this and what's the urgency of it. And if we can do that, then we can delegate well within that task based upon, again, skill level, their experience, all those things, right?
So we're talking about delegation and why, what it is, what it's not, and why, and a little bit of even how. One of the phrases that you use, maybe as we kind of summarize the delegation here, something that you use, I think that would be incredible for us all to hear, is accountable guidance.
Yeah. Okay.
Talk about that.
So accountable guidance is one of those things that we use as we observe a lot of different companies and teams. We think, well, how do we put this in words that make sense? And so one of the phrases that we've often used is avoidance is not accountability. And then from that, we're like, well, wait a minute, what's the extreme of that? And it's the control. Yeah. Right? So you have avoidance and you have control. And in the middle of those two, you have accountable guidance. So what do we mean by this? So you can't delegate and just avoid the situation after that. We'd call that task dumping. That's when you just like, here, take it and let me know when it's done, especially if it has high risk and high urgency. That's just incompetence at that point. Why would you do that? You're putting you at risk. You're putting your company at risk. So the idea is you can't avoid. You have to be able to learn to balance this. But on the other extreme, you have the control piece, which is the micromanagement. You're telling them everything to do. And if you're going to do that, you're creating what you would call a shadow, right? You're just having a shadow.
Right.
But in the middle, we call this balance accountable guidance.
Yeah. One of the things I love, that the image that I get out of that is, in accountable guidance, with delegation, I'm not removing myself from the picture.
Yep.
I'm strategically placing myself where that person needs me to be to ensure their success.
Yeah.
So it doesn't remove me. It strategically places me in the best place for them to win.
Yeah, 100%. And so I'm going to read it straight from our definition, because we put time into this, right? So the ability to delegate responsibilities and tasks with the right amount of guidance. That's accountable guidance. But it's encompassed with clarity on expectations and accountability. So you have to have clarity on expectations and accountability in order for it to be good accountable guidance.
That's delegation without accountability is a misuse of delegation.
Yep.
You're using people.
Yeah. Okay, let's go into a little bit of something that people forget about, which is lateral delegation. I love to bring this up because one of the things that I think of is, like, sometimes we think, well, they're not on our team, I can't delegate to them. But if you have good peer-to-peer accountability and you win as a team, lose as a team mentality, which I think is a healthy way to look at it, you can delegate to peers if there's that trust, that mutual trust put there, right?
Absolutely.
So some ideas of, like, peer-to-peer type of accountability where you're actually, or a delegation and accountability. Here's an example. Like, the workflow of your company is not siloed. If it was, then every division would be its own company. These departments work together for an end result. Sometimes we don't act like that. Sometimes we are siloed. And so we got to break past those barriers. And one of the ways is building that trust to be able to delegate to the next department, right? So I think of, like, handoff meetings. It's a great delegation tool. Okay. Here's what the client has requested. Here's the promises made that we had with the client. Here are some of the special requests they had. You are literally delegating it to them when you hand off something with clear expectations and accountability. That is a form of delegation. Lateral delegation exists between departments, between teams and their peers.
Right.
And we kind of gave more of a macro view, but zoom in a little bit on teams. There are things that, you start as a team, you start working on something, and you find out, I don't have the brain power to do this. Right? What did Woodrow Wilson said? I don't use all my brains. I use everyone else's brains. Right. And it's a great way to think about it, in the sense of, on our team, sometimes we might have to delegate. Doesn't mean that you just task dump it. You got to talk about it with the accountability piece, but it's needed. So lateral delegation.
It's good. It's a tool that needs explored further. What does it look like for cross-functional collaboration? Yeah,
for sure. All right, so let's think about this as within the role delegation. Let's just leave with these 3 areas, and we've alluded on them, but let's recap them a little bit. First is clarity. Like, if we're going to delegate, because we go back to the axis of, we're expediting experience, right? We're putting high burden on people. We're putting good guidance and mentor into it. But also within the task itself, you had mentioned some of what's their skill level? First, maybe touch on this real quick. What are those 4 areas that you use with your team on the apprentice, the novice? Go into that real quick.
So clarity, I just want to come into an agreement of where they see themselves, not as a whole, but on this particular specific project. Do they think that they're a novice? They have all the will, the drive to do it, but no applied experience.
Right.
So they're a novice. They've never done it before, but they want to. Or maybe they're a journeyman. They have the will to do it. They have the drive, the energy to do it. And they have some cross-related experience, or they've seen others somewhat, they've seen it done. They have a general interest towards it. And so there's that. And then you get this apprentice. I have, not only do I have the will to do it, but I actually have applied knowledge. I have proven success. I've done this with others. I may not have been the leader, but I've been a part of the team. And then a master. right? An expert.
I
have done this. I have the desire, the knowledge, and the expertise to do this. So we come together on how do they see themselves in this project. And then in the clarity, we decide who has final authority over this project.
Yeah.
Just because I've delegated it to you does not mean you get full authority.
Yeah.
You have full responsibility, but I keep the authority. Or I tell them you have the authority and the responsibility.
Yeah.
So you have to get clear on the authority and responsibility that you're giving them.
And no matter how you label those. So, listening to this, if you want to label these differently, you're right. It's like beginner, intermediate, journeyman and expert, advanced and expert, right? However you want to label it, put it into those buckets. But here's why I like 4. There was a Harvard Review article a long time ago I read that was like, hey, quit giving people, 1 to 10s. Quit giving people 1 to 5s. Those odd, whether it's an odd number or even number, it doesn't matter. But you're giving them a middle ground.
Right.
Right? So you got 4 options. When they choose on their own where they're at, you can kind of see they're leaning towards really knowing it, or they need that guidance.
Yeah.
Right. So whatever they choose, you can kind of see, and you're starting to create clarity. So recapping on that, clarity means you have to talk about expectations. Where do they see themselves on this? And maybe this isn't just in task. Maybe this is something with their role, but maybe it is a task, right? So clarity, what are the expectations now? So going into expectations, they've decided where they are. You've talked about it. You've been able to help them and guide them in some of it. But now we're talking about expectations.
Yeah.
What are we going to talk about when we get to expectations?
Absolutely. Well, they should know. Do they get a team? Do they have a budget? When do you need it by? You know, what's the purpose? What's the bigger why? What do you expect this to accomplish?
Yep.
All of those expectations need to be agreed upon before you just fully give them the task or the project to do it.
Write it down. Right? It's got to be kept somewhere.
Right.
Write it down. Have a mutual agreement. And are you going to do this with everything? No. But there is going to be a rhythm that you create in this and a culture you create in this if you do write it down for the sort of the medium risk type stuff, right? If it's the task where in the matrix where it just is like, hey, you got this, go with it. If it's that kind of task, well, okay, maybe we don't need to go through this process. But if it's one of those, it does have high risk attached to it and maybe some urgency attached to it, we need to talk about it and get it in writing.
Right.
Right? And it'd be quick notes, shared notes, whatever.
It's good.
Right? All right. And then the last one, did you have something to add to that?
I don't.
Okay. All right. So then the last one is accountability, the rhythm to all this. So you have your clarity, you have your expectations. Now you have to have accountability with rhythm. So best methods here, right? Time is our commodity that nobody seems to have, right? So talk about it a little bit in the meeting aspect. How do you keep a good rhythm with especially some of those higher risk items? Yeah,
you talk about time as a commodity, and on the other side is wisdom is the thing you get after you've done it.
Yeah, yeah. Once you get the time, right?
Yeah. After you've done it, like all the wisdom comes. So how can you somewhat leverage time to get the wisdom so you get the wisdom on the beforehand? It's taking the time to slow down.
Yep.
And have the clarity, get the right expectations, and then figure out, are we going to meet weekly? Are we going to meet monthly? Like how often are we going to update progress together so we can stay on the same sheet? You've got to you talked about it. It was accountable guidance.
Accountable guidance.
This is where you come in to make sure delegation is done well.
Yeah. So without clarity, without good expectations, and without accountability and that rhythm that you have in it, expect that those tasks are probably going to fall or they're going to fail at one point. So we've got to keep up with shoring these systems up.
I had a friend recently tell me this, and I love it. I've used it in so many different areas of my life. There is no game plan that goes according to plan. There is no game. I mean, in a football game, the moment the ball is kicked, game plan changes. Yeah, because what the team thought the other team was going to do, they didn't. Right. So your game plan didn't go according to plan. Yeah. It's true even with when we're delegating. It's not going to go according to plan. Yeah. So you have to meet regular and often.
Got to huddle up.
I'm
going to go with yours. You got to huddle up and you got to put the time and the energy into it. Yeah. Absolutely. Good stuff. Delegation. Delegate like your business depends on it.
Goals never die. Soul's gotta fly high. I'm taking off to the sky. And with every day that goes by, I'm making sure that it counts. It don't matter what's the amount, you only get now.